The stretcher slammed against the wall with a metallic thud. The wounded child on top let out a choked cry, then passed out again. Nurse Calder didn't stop. He grabbed the frame, corrected course, and shouted, "Make way." As he pushed through the narrow corridor cluttered with medical crates, power cables, and crying refugees, the USV Mercy was full beyond full. Designed for short-range evac missions, it was now dragging 1,000 souls through neutral space. The last survivors of New Antioch Colony after the meteor storm turned their cities to glass. The ship creaked with stress, seams groaning, oxygen systems redlining. In every hallway, makeshift triage stations pulsed under flickering emergency lights. An elderly man lay with a shattered leg on a row of cargo containers turned into stretchers. A woman whispered prayers over her unconscious husband, his skin scorched from atmospheric reentry debris. Children, dirty and silent, sat clinging to one another in the corners, numb. The ship reeked of iodine, blood, recycled sweat. Machines beeped, wires sparked, fans buzzed like distant flies. There was no music, no calm, only function and desperation. Dr. Monroe, lead physician, leaned over a patient's open abdomen in medbay, sleeves rolled up, eyes sunken. "We're out of morphine," he muttered. "Get me something to clamp the artery, damn it." An intern hesitated, glancing toward a burnt cabinet. "We used the last on deck 3. Then the ship shook, not the soft groan of old hull plating, but a violent, jarring shudder that knocked trays and bodies off balance. Red lights flared instantly. "Impact on stern engineering quadrant," someone shouted from the intercom, then static. The next hit ripped through deck 5. The Mercy lurched hard, metal shearing as something exploded outside. Sirens screamed. Monroe dropped his tool and ran to the nearest console. "Where the hell is our escort?" he barked. "Security measures failed," Brack said. "They bypassed everything, we're flying blind and soft." There was no answer. On the bridge, Lieutenant Brack scrambled through the comms panel, blinking against sparks flying from the shorted navigation console. "No response from Earth Command," he said to no one in particular. "We're in a dead zone, no relays for 50 parsecs." The external cams flickered once, then returned, giving the crew a clear view of what had struck them. 3 HAR ships, long, angular, and pulse black, hovered just outside engagement range. Unlike traditional warcraft, HAR vessels looked like curved blades, polished and wet. Their hulls shimmered in the dark, their drive trails pulsing with unnatural energy. At their core, faint purple light spilled from bioreactors stitched together with mechanical frames. Predatory. Fast. And then the boarding message came. A voice, sharp, deep, rasped through alien vocal folds, boomed on all open channels. "This is Captain Morak of the Horror's Pirate Fraternity. Your vessel is unarmed. Your fate is delayed. We'll return to collect the rest. Consider this a courtesy." The comms cut. Instantly after, precision burst struck the Mercy's propulsion ring. Secondary explosions rocked the port side, and a section of the hull vented atmosphere into space. Bulkhead seals slammed into place. Silence followed, not peace, silence. In that moment, with fires dying and only the emergency klaxons ringing at intervals, the ship became a tomb. Somewhere a tool clinked to the floor and rolled in slow circles. No one moved to stop it. The only sound was the mechanical pulse of dying systems and the breaths of people waiting to die. Calder staggered back into the medbay, face pale. "They're leaving," he said in disbelief. Dr. Monroe looked at him, trembling hands still holding a cauterizer. No reinforcements, no weapons, no time. On the bridge, Brack slumped against the console, hands shaking. "We're dead." Somewhere down the corridor, a child began to sob. Metal groaned above as temperature regulators failed. Dr. Monroe slammed his fist against the console, breath ragged. "We've lost life support on Deck 5, and half our oxygen reserves are venting through hull section 12. If they come back, we won't last 5 minutes." Nurse Calder finished for him. The bridge was chaos. Lieutenant Brack had both arms buried inside a smoking panel, trying to reroute power from backup arrays. Sparks bit into his wrists. Across the room, a junior medic, Ethan Maries, hovered over the comms terminal. The screen buzzed with interference, static carving across the waveforms. "Signal range is reduced," Maries said, voice dry. "But I can bounce a compressed SOS through the emergency medical relay. It's short range only, no guarantees it'll get picked up." "Send it," Monroe said. Maries hesitated. "Even if someone hears it, we're not a warship, we're just—" Monroe cut him off. "We send it now." He keyed in the sequence. A red icon pulsed. The waveform sharpened for a split second, stabilized. A compressed package shot through space. Medical identifier, ship ID, casualty count, distress flag, then silence. Maris slumped back, it's out. Good, Monroe said, now we wait to die. No one responded, the words hung in the air like gas. That's when the voice came, we'll be dead before they return, it said. The room froze, it came from the threshold of the corridor where smoke coiled from a damaged light panel. The figure stood still, shadowed, 1 foot slightly forward. He didn't look like command. His vest was torn, scuffed at the edges. No tags. His shirt was clean but unremarkable, sleeves rolled to the elbow. On his right temple, a fine silver scar crept into the hairline. His face was lined, but the eyes, one slightly hooded, were steady, focused. We need to act, he said again, now. Someone near the aft bulkhead muttered, who the hell is that? Angus MacGyver stepped in. Not quickly, not slowly, just enough to make everyone clear the path. He scanned the room once, eyes flicking from power conduits to floor mounts to exposed medlines. His hands didn't move, but his brain already had. He pointed at Brack, reroute auxiliary power through the secondary nav board and isolate Deck 7. I need bot access. Called her, get every surgical unit still running into Cargo Bay 4. Maris, strip the med pod racks and bring me the oxygen tanks behind Tribay. Excuse me, who? Monroe began approaching. Angus turned just enough to meet his eyes. 40 minutes, that's all we've got. But we've already. Angus raised a hand, palm outward. Doctor, either follow or move. He was already walking. He moved through the wreckage like a man checking off a mental list, not searching, verifying. A dropped gurney became a structural brace. A discarded surgical pump became a sealant cannon with the right rerouting. A medbot, childlike in shape, painted in white with cartoon stickers from the pediatric ward, was pulled apart in seconds. What are you waiting to bot? Asked Maris, alarmed. Converting it, Angus said, not looking up. Watch your fingers. You can't possibly think we can stop them, Monroe said. We're medics, not Marines. Angus paused, looked up. Doesn't matter, this ship has tools, tools can be repurposed. Calder, blood on his uniform, hesitated with a half-assembled rebreather in his hand. You sound like you've done this before. Angus glanced at the tool in Calder's hand. Finish that, it'll be your job to keep Deck 2 sealed. Instead, he pointed toward the main oxygen routing junction. Open that, we're turning the filtration system into a directional overpressure cannon. Kev blinked into a what? It'll make sense in a minute, Angus replied. And it did. Within 10 minutes, chaos turned to rhythm. Questions turned to tasks. Hesitation became movement. Brack, despite his fear, rewrote drone subroutines while biting his lip to stop the tremor in his jaw. Maris dragged rehydration pods from the lower medic, following instructions that sounded more like war scripts than engineering. Calder disinfected scalpel racks with shaking hands. As people moved around him, one of the junior techs pulled Monroe aside. Who is he? What's he doing on board? Monroe shook his head. We pulled his name off the manifest. Civilian contractor, logistics assistant, but have you seen the way he moves, like he's done this in his sleep? No one had answers, yet everyone followed, and Angus didn't look back. Pressure too low, Angus muttered. He twisted the valve with his bare hand until the copper thread creaked. The tube hissed, releasing a concentrated jet of oxygen. He closed the circuit, rerouted the energy feed from the thermal recycling panel and pulled back to watch the reaction. The oxygen tank vibrated once, then stabilized. Good, he said to no one. Behind him, Maris and Brack stood frozen, staring at the jury-rigged mechanism. That's a life support tube, Maris whispered. Not anymore, Angus replied. It's a directional explosive. Cargo Bay 4 was unrecognizable. Where there had been crates of medical supplies, now there were rows of modified oxygen canisters pressurized to the brink. Scalpels had been magnetized and inserted into vented chambers. When the tanks blew, they'd shred the air like glass in a storm. Angus turned to Kev. Fuse the next set, bring in another med pod, we're lining the corridor with decoys. Those pods are active, Kev said. They've still got stabilization charges running. Even better, that's our trip wires. Throughout the Mercy, chaos had hardened into movement. Not order, this wasn't military precision but something more desperate and human, improvised genius, controlled panic. On Deck 3, Calder crouched beside a repair drone the size of a suitcase, its body marked with pediatric logos, smiling suns and stars. He pried the access panel open and looked toward Angus for confirmation. Cut the core, Angus said. This thing's designed to deliver medication to infants, Calder replied. Now it's delivering shrapnel, pull it. He did, the drone twitched once, then went still. Angus took a modified orbital scalpel from a nearby tray and slotted it into a launcher rig. With careful pressure, he aligned the targeting mechanism to the bot's rudimentary motion sensor. Brack stepped closer. You're turning medical bots into mines. I'm turning what we have into what we need. Brack glanced at the console readout. Pressure limits too high, it'll rupture early. I know, Angus pulled the module out, reset it, and started over. We'll do it again. That became a pattern. Angus moved fast, but when it mattered, when something wasn't exact, he stopped and rebuilt again and again. It wasn't enough to work. It had to be precise. The crew watched him, first in silence, then with half-swallowed questions. Where did he learn that? Kev whispered to Maurice. No one just knows this, not like that. He walks like he's timed every breath, he doesn't even sweat. On Deck 2, Calder followed Angus' instructions to reroute coolant into the ship's filtration system. Tubes hissed, lights flickered, and then the entire panel turned green. You just turned the air system into a plasma coil, Calder said, stunned. Unstable short range, no recoil, Angus confirmed. Keep the coolant low, don't let the core breach. Who taught you this? Angus didn't answer, he was already moving on. In the armory, Maurice laid out surgical gloves dipped in accelerant next to empty auto-injectors. What's this for? Flash charges, Angus said. Throw in blind, don't get fancy. I thought this was a medical ship, Maurice said under his breath. Angus looked up, paused for just a second, then said quietly, I thought New Antioch was a safe colony. It silenced the room. In hallway C7, 3 med pods were rigged with proximity sensors. Angus knelt behind them, fingers tightening the last segment of wiring. Brack leaned in. What are you hiding in there? Saline and trauma gel, Angus said. That's it, compressed and primed. When they open the pod, it'll burst into foam, slows them, confuses them, then the floor vents activate. You're not planning to kill them all with one shot. No, Angus said. I plan to make them walk into it thinking we're helpless, then I close the doors. A tremor rippled through the deck, everyone paused, the lights flickered once. Brack moved to the nearest console and pulled up the tracking array. Static jumped across the display, then stabilized. Maurice leaned in. They're back. Brack nodded, 2 ships on approach. Same vector, estimated re-entry in 11 minutes. One of the pediatric bots chirped weakly and shut down. A tray slid off a gurney and hit the floor. No one moved to pick it up. One of the med bots shivered on its own wheels. Somewhere a wrench fell off a tray. The crew didn't breathe, no one spoke, the silence was thick. Angus straightened up positions, he said, everyone to their stations. The crew didn't hesitate this time. Kevin Maurice ran to Deck 5, where reprogrammed medical bots were being positioned under floor plates. Calder stayed on Deck 2, sealing the corridors with pressure doors linked to motion triggers. Monroe moved through the medbay, checking on wounded still too fragile to move. Angus returned to the central core, where he'd already rigged the spinal conduit to overload on command. He touched a data pad and watched the system cycle through diagnostics. Someone behind him cleared their throat. It was Monroe. You ever seen this kind of thing before? He asked quietly. Angus didn't look at him. I remember a jungle, cold, that's the part they never talk about. Everyone says jungle and they think heat, but this one was cold, wet. 6 of us with nothing but steel wire and a bag of salt. Monroe blinked. Salt. They had waterborne tracking drones. Salt shut down the sensors. It bought us 2 hours and 2 hours was enough. Monroe stared at him, uncertain. Where was that? Angus said nothing. In the corner, a bot chirped once and reactivated. Kev's voice crackled over the intercom. We're set on the lower deck, mines armed, motion triggers live. Understood, Angus replied. Brack checked the sensor again. 6 minutes, they're speeding up. The Mercy had changed, the walls hummed, vents clicked in unnatural sync, pods blinked with fake vitals. Under every clean surface, something sharp waited. The air tasted metallic, and for the first time since the storm, the crew stood still, not in fear but readiness. Angus moved to the forward hatch, checked the lock seal, then turned to the crew. This isn't war, this is surgery, he said. You don't scream in the OR, you don't freeze, you cut, you cauterize. And when it's done, he stopped, looked back at the schematic of the Mercy, you close the incision and move on. The crew stared, then Maris nodded. Calder tightened his grip on the injector rig. Brack set his jaw and turned back to the controls. On the console, the HAR ships dropped from FTL. The clock hit 0. The first HARS boarding spike hit the Mercy's outer hull with a dull, hollow impact. Then another, and another. The clamps hissed as they locked onto the Mercy's frame. Magnetic anchors bit through charred plating, twin impact arms extended from the sleek underbellies of the pirate vessels. Dark, crescent-shaped ships that shimmered with an oily hue as if soaked in tar. The horrors had returned. Inside the Mercy, silence. Not a single alarm, not a light flickering, no movement in the corridors. The ship floated in darkness, its engines cold, its sensors passive, just another broken vessel, gutted and ready for harvest. It was the HAR signature. Strike fast, vanish, and return later to scavenge what couldn't scream. On board the lead pirate ship, the bone hook Captain Morok reclined lazily in his gravity chair. He flexed the tentacle cluster that drooped from his chin, long fingers curling as he observed the data feed. HAR's physiology wasn't made for comfort. They were tall, sinewy, covered in semi-translucent skin flecked with bioluminescent nodes. Small bony protrusions ran along their skulls in symmetrical ridges, and their chins bore 3 or 4 tendrils each, twitching with agitation when they communicated. Their uniforms were loose, asymmetrical, designed for fluid movement, coated in reactive mesh that hardened at impact. Morok's translator clicked. Scans show life signs, minimal, less than 20 moving warm bodies. He smirked. They're bleeding. The ship's done. Round up the leftovers. 4 boarding crews launched inside the Mercy. The breach came fast. The airlocks burst outward. Plasma torches sliced clean through welds. The horrors poured in, 18 in total, armed with charged halberds and gravity rifles, their footfalls thudding over the steel floors. And then came the first beep. Soft, childlike, a pediatric medbot rolled from the shadows. It blinked once, spoke in a gentle pre-recorded tone. The horrors paused. One raised his weapon. The bot didn't react. Its painted smile glowed under the corridor lights. Then it blinked. You're safe here. Then it detonated. The blast tore through the lead formation. 3 horrors were thrown backward, tendrils severed mid-motion. The hallway lights snapped on all at once. Brilliant white, no sirens, just silence as another bot activated from the floor and moved in. The next squad stepped into hallway B7 toward a line of med pods showing weak life signs. Their bioscanners lit up. Heartbeats detected. They advanced. The med pods burst open with a hiss, releasing a high-pressure stream of trauma gel and compressed saline. The mixture coated their optics. They stumbled and the floor lit up. The vents below surged with electrical discharge. 4s convulsed, their armor shorting, weapons dropped. Above them, from the air duct, a burst of sharp metal. Orbital scalpels, magnetized, spun like shuriken from a launcher embedded in the vent housing. One sliced into the throat of a HARS trooper mid-step. Another lodged into a breathing cluster. They fell. Angus watched it all from the operations center. Motion alerts pulsed on screen, synced to corridor heat maps. Each blink marked a heartbeat out of place. Alone, he sat in the auxiliary command seat surrounded by screens, each one displaying a different corridor, a different trap, a different surgical outcome. His fingers danced over a touchpad, adjusting angles. No expression, no joy, just work. He zoomed in on hallway C3. A single horrors warrior broke from his group. He turned a corner, breathing hard, weapon raised. The corridor before him was clear, silent, empty. He ran. The door slammed shut behind him. A pressurized warning blinked red. He spun, screamed. The lights in the corridor turned blue. A fine mist vented from the ceiling. Plasma ignited. Angus adjusted the coolant ratio on the control panel, just enough to keep the temperature beneath structural risk. The horrors disintegrated. From the bone hook, Morok watched his HUD flicker, his brow ridge curled with confusion. What the is happening inside? He snarled, his tentacles flaring, his comm buzzed. This is Unit 4, static, they're killing us and we don't even know what. Silence. Morok leaned forward. 2 more HARS crews entered Medbay 2. One of them, Eek, wide-shouldered and heavier boned than the rest, spotted movement. A shadow slipped behind a cabinet. He fired. Nothing. He approached, raised his rifle. The cabinet clicked. Behind it, one of the med pods let out a soft exhale. The vitals spiked. A heartbeat. Eek snarled. Advanced. The pod burst open. It wasn't a patient inside. It was a detonator cluster armed with surgical saws, repurposed bone drillers, and thermal injectors. The blast was directional, outward, upward, perfectly measured. Eek's body was torn apart in 3 directions at once. The last surviving horrors inside the Mercy screamed as he tried to throw down his weapon. Hands up! He ran down the hall toward the exit. Angus watched him from monitor 17. He didn't blink. He pressed one key. The emergency bulkhead closed behind the fleeing pirate. Locked. The man turned, saw the vent glow. It didn't fire, not immediately. For a breathless second, he thought it would spare him, then it released. A focused plasma jet, no wider than a medical catheter, burned through the length of the corridor. He didn't scream, there was no time. Back on the bone hook, Morok slammed a clawed fist onto his console. Status report, silence. The transmission channel lit up, a single feed activated, unauthorized. The view was from outside the Mercy, from a HAR ship's own observation cam. It showed the starboard breach port. Tiny sparks danced in the void. Bodies, dozens, floating, twisting, limbs missing, armor blackened, scalpels embedded in eye sockets. One medbot drifted by slowly, still intact, its cartoon sun smiling. Then it blinked, a soft red light lit up behind the lens. Then it too exploded. The comm went dead, Morok's eyes widened. His crew stood frozen. Then the auxiliary sensor array pinged. They had one last shuttle still docked to Mercy's upper hull. The feed activated. Inside were 3 HARS engineers. One reached for the manual override. A thin red beam, almost invisible, sliced horizontally through the cabin. The feed went white. Angus leaned back in his chair, closed the final relay, and let the systems cool. He exhaled, slow, reached for a cloth, and wiped his fingers clean. Less than 10 minutes. He tapped the intercom. Clear, he said simply. In the corridor just outside operations, Kev stood frozen. His hand still gripped a fire extinguisher he never had to use. He stared at the monitor, then at the doors, then at Angus through the glass. Kev whispered, "We're medics. How the hell did we just do that?" But no one answered. The transmission hit the edge of the Corin interceptor array with a flicker of static, then embedded cleanly into the data buffer. Unregistered SOS signal, Class 7, the technician muttered, his voice monotone. Short-range burst relay, no encryption, origin neutral sector, quadrant Epsilon 12. Across the command deck of the Corin High Diplomatic Corps vessel, Soli, the atmosphere remained composed, clean, cold. A perfect circle of polished black stone surrounded the control platform. Every wall was seamless, every console embedded into smooth surfaces. No cables, no seams, no signs of entropy. At the center of the chamber, General Herrick leaned back in his observation chair, adjusting the collar of his high-structured robe. The Kororan didn't wear armor, they wore status. Herrick's outfit was crafted from interwoven fibers of reactive silk, black and gold, with raised circuit embossings down each arm that shimmered with faint electric pulses when he moved. His skin was glass smooth and alabaster white, traced with faint silver veins that pulsed in rhythm with his biosuit. Human signal, the technician continued. Medical designation, USV Mercy. Herrick sighed, Earths. To his left, Ambassador Varric chuckled, the sound low and condescending. Again, a third voice, younger, more eager, strategist Jalen leaned forward. Shall I inform the Ministry of Human Affairs? Herrick shook his head. No need. This is a diplomatic opportunity, a clean rescue, quiet sector, weak ship, make a show of it. Varric smirked, and the cameras. Eric gestured with a lazy flick of the hand. Send the broadcast rig. I want full spectrum lenses, dynamic light readjustment. Make sure we capture the approach sequence in full orbital clarity. Shall I dispatch a combat wing in case? Eric cut Jalen off with a look. It's a human ambulance, strategist. If it's been boarded, we'll step over the corpses with respect. If not, we'll smile for the lens and pretend to care. Orders transmitted. Within 6 minutes, 2 Kororan diplomatic frigates and 1 spherical broadcast satellite accelerated toward the Mercy's coordinates. From the outside, the Mercy looked dead. No running lights, no plasma trail. Her hull spun slowly on the axis, barely tethered to stabilization. Around her, debris. Dozens of bodies drifted in silence, some scorched, others punctured by microblades, several with eyes frozen wide in vacuum exposure. Closer inspection showed the corpses weren't human. Their limbs were too long, skins slick and pale, chins draped with curled tendrils. From the Mercy's forward observation window, Kev watched one of the corpses turn slowly, then bump off a hull plate. He flinched. Inside, the cleaning had begun. Calder and Maris dragged another HAR's body into the lock chamber. Its armor was half-melted, skin split open where plasma had scorched it clean through. Doesn't feel right, Maris muttered, hoisting it by the arm. It's protocol, Calder replied, not looking up. Decontaminate, eject, seal the hull. Maris stared at the floating figure. I mean, we're medics. We're supposed to treat wounds, not create them. Calder didn't answer. Across the corridor, Kev hesitated in front of an open hatch. Another body lay slumped against the wall, half burned, still twitching slightly. He held the body hook in one hand, frozen. Angus approached behind him, calm, silent. Kev turned, eyes wide. Is he? Angus checked the chest cavity, glanced at the readout on his wrist pad. Residual synaptic feedback, no cognition, he's gone. Kev looked away. I don't think I cans. Protocol of decontamination, Angus said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Exposure risk ends when the airlock closes. Kev nodded once, pale, and moved. Throughout the Mercy, the crew worked in near silence. Surgical, no one asked what came next, no one wanted to speak first, every step felt like finishing someone else's sentence. Focused. Monroe oversaw sanitation, passes through the medbays. Maris wiped down blood-soaked panels with medical-grade foam. Calder rewired BOF filter ports to purge organics from the ventilation. Between tasks, they spoke in whispers. You think they're going to charge us for this, charge us for surviving, still, this feels like something Command would want buried. Kev sat near the gravity junction for a moment too long, hands shaking. Maris approached. You all right? Kev nodded slowly. I keep hearing them, the way they screamed, I didn't think HARs could scream like that. Maris sat down beside him. We're still alive. Yeah, but I don't know who did that. I was here, I helped. But I don't know what I became in that moment. Down in the main operations deck, Angus checked the power flows, stabilized cooling systems. Online, the ship was functional again, quiet, almost back to what it had been, minus the blood and debris. He didn't speak to anyone unless needed. He didn't record a report. He simply walked from system to system, checking, repairing, preparing. As the last body was ejected through the dorsal port, the Corin broadcast satellite entered proximity. Its lens rotated into position. The scene it captured was sterile. The Mercy drifted silently against a field of stars, no movement visible from outside. The bodies floated around her, perfectly spaced, as if the violence had paused mid-motion and frozen in place. A diorama of aftermath. The diplomatic frigates pulled into formation, lights on, shields primed not for combat, but to reflect light for the cameras. From the Soli, General Herrick adjusted his collar again. Approach slow, lateral pass, keep the starboard lights on, I want maximum contrast. Ambassador Varick leaned in. Will you address the satellite directly? Of course, Herrick said, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve. Begin recording in standard human dialect. He turned toward the projection drone, composed himself, and began. This is General Herrick of the Corin Corps, extending formal humanitarian support to our lesser associates in the Human Republic. We answer your call for aid with dignity and compassion. We approach now. His voice was smooth, the posture rehearsed. Behind him, strategist Jalen checked the telemetry feed. Sir, the vessel shows no critical damage. It appears intact. Strange. Varick murmured, no distress beacon is currently active, Jalen added. Even better, Eric replied. We'll look twice as noble when we pretend to rescue what doesn't need rescuing. As they neared the Mercy, the satellite adjusted focus. Bodies turned in the light. One drifted close to the lens, HARS, scorched, mouth open, eyes gone. The feed went quiet for a second. The broadcast team didn't comment. One of the junior officers shifted in his seat. Another pretended to adjust the focus. No one on the bridge did. Herrick frowned. Why are there no humans floating? Jalen looked over the data. No sign of human casualties outside the vessel. Varick straightened. Then who did all this? Herrick didn't answer. The Mercy did not respond to their hails. No greeting, no lights, just quiet. Herrick cleared his throat. Send a team aboard and keep the cameras rolling. As the Corin shuttle disengaged from its dock and moved toward the Mercy's hull, the transmission remained open. Millions across the galactic network were already watching. The broadcast drone drifted into stabilization orbit 20 km off Mercy's bow. Its cameras adjusted to compensate for the rotation of the human ship, slowly panning to frame the hull, the void, and the field of bodies that floated between. Live transmission initiated. Inside the control deck of the Corin frigate, Soli Technician Second-Class Dren tapped through diagnostics, his silver-ringed eyes flicking rapidly across his interface. Feed live, translation overlay functional, external audio muted, broadcasting in full spectrum local and central galactic nets. Maintain full capture. General Herrick said from his elevated seat, begin system analysis. From the deck below, a soft hum rose as analysts connected to the Mercy's passive telemetry. Vessel status, asked strategist Jalen, eyes narrowed. Online, replied analyst Gorv. Power level stable, no reactor breach. Engines dormant but primed, no active distress beacon. Herrick turned slightly in his chair, still no response. None, said Gorv. Internal comms silent, no defensive systems triggered. Curious, murmured Varric, arms crossed. For a ship that asked for help, it seems rather composed. Across the feed, the satellite lens zoomed in. A HAR's body drifted past, spinning slowly. The tentacles along its jawline curled inward, frozen mid-death. The armor was cracked along the sternum, fractured cleanly in an X shape. Surgical. The body tumbled gently out of frame. Another followed. Half a torso charred black along one side. A thin line of cauterized tissue separated clean tissue from scorched muscle. Varric flinched. Replay that angle. The analyst obeyed, the drone refocused. This time the camera lingered a second too long. A small object floated into frame, a scalpel, single-edged stainless human. Blood still clung to the blade, frozen in needle-like threads that extended in fractal branches from the tip. The galactic feed pulsed with activity. On Hellion Prime, in the orbital lounge of the Malk Confederacy, a dozen officials stood frozen around a projection globe. That's a surgical blade, muttered Admiral Varric, blinking slowly. I've seen that model before, civilian issue trauma packs. In the political exchange floor of Venthar's 6th Dome, one of the commentators stammered mid-broadcast. We are receiving confirmation. Yes, these are not military weapons. The Mercy is a medical ship, no registered armament. In a mining barge orbiting Darl's Belt, a pair of Vornar refugees stared at the screen. Are those the pirates that hit Sector Theta? One asked. The other leaned forward. They're all dead. Back aboard the Soy, Herrick's voice dropped to a whisper. How many bodies? The answer came from the analytical bay. 42 confirmed, all horrors, no human corpses. The room didn't move for once. The silence belonged to them. None, Varric snapped, none. Strategist Jalen turned from his console. Sir, tactical mapping of hull damage complete. Herrick nodded, and the answer didn't come immediately. The lead technician's voice finally broke the silence, quiet and almost uncertain. There is no tactical damage, no weapons fire consistent with naval-grade cannons, no energy burn from standard ship-mounted systems. There are anomalous scorches, unclassified energy signatures, but structurally the Mercy is intact. The room shifted for the first time. No one spoke. Explain the anomalies, Eric said slowly. Localized plasma ignition, likely internal, controlled, surgical. Surgical, Varric repeated, bitter. Are you implying this was done from inside the ship? Another technician turned his screen. You should see this, sir. A 3D breakdown of the Mercy's vent system blinked into life. Overlaid were pulsing red points, explosion markers, directional vectors, heat residuals. All weapons appear to be improvised, said the technician. Oxygen compression systems used as kinetic cannons, plasma regulators rerouted into ignition traps, medbots reprogrammed, some were used as mines. Impossible, Jalen said. Confirmed, the analyst countered. Timestamps indicate full system rerouting completed under an hour, 47 minutes to be exact. That can't be, Varric said. You can't reconfigure a vessel like that in under an hour. You can if you know where to cut, someone whispered. It was Gorv. All eyes turned to him. I served on a human research vessel during the Lysov Treaty. I saw one of their surgeons build a cryostasis array out of salvage and intravenous kits in 90 minutes. That was one man, Jalen snapped. Gorv held his gaze. Maybe this was two. The drone zoomed again. A new object drifted past. A Medbot pediatric model. Its white shell was cracked open. One eye lens dangled, still blinking weakly. Millions of viewers were now watching. On Hydros 2, a Varani trader turned to his son. They turned their bots into bombs. In a war council on Junville Station, Fleet Marshal Ronks barked, "Turn that feed off. Get me intelligence on every human medical vessel within 3 sectors." On the central exchange of Harkin Spire, news anchors spoke over one another. A massacre, no military logs, still no word from the human command. What kind of species does this from a hospital ship? In the Soy's command deck, Herrick finally stood. The camera still rolled. Behind him, the galactic broadcast continued. No audio, just images. What had been planned as a moment of scripted diplomacy had become a dissection, live and uninterrupted. The Mercy floated in silence, her hull unmarred, her system stable. Around her, the corpses of her attackers hung like an orbit of failure. There were no banners, no messages, no threats, just precision, just aftermath. Tension rippled under Herrick's synthetic skin, a soft glow bleeding through the silver veins. "End the transmission," he said quietly. Sir Jalin asked. A sticker on the casing read, "You're brave." Its lower section was blown outward. Inside, fragments of sharpened surgical tools, coiled tubing, burst compression valves. The camera lingered. No one spoke. Then the feed blinked as if even the drone had hesitated. As I said, end it now. The screen cut to black. No music, no fade, just absence. And everywhere across the stars, the same question spread faster than any broadcast ever had. How did a human ambulance win a war in under 10 minutes, and why did they make it look easier than breathing? The Mercy's lights remained dim. No alerts, no voices, no emergency tones. The bridge hummed softly, a quiet throb of restored systems pulsing beneath the deck like a distant heartbeat. Cooling fans spun in slow rhythm. The overhead lights cycled through a low-power diagnostic pattern, casting pale bands across the floor and walls. Angus stood at the central terminal. One hand rested on the console, the other adjusted environmental readouts with calm precision. The air recyclers were stable, gravity at 95%, pressure seals reconfigured, no external breaches, no power faults, no chatter. Behind him, Kev sat on the edge of a crate, elbows on knees, eyes staring at nothing. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Calder swept a rag across the medbay bulkhead, scrubbing away a streak of dried blood with slow circular motions. No one asked him to, he just couldn't stop. Maurice walked down the corridor in silence, cradling a broken med scanner like it was a wounded child. He passed Monroe, who was reorganizing inventory racks by alphabetical code, paused twice between B and C before realizing he'd already finished that shelf. No one spoke. Inside the Mercy, the temperature was warm, lights worked, gravity held, people moved with purpose, and yet the ship felt hollow, like everything had already happened. Angus moved from station to station, adjusting thermal stabilizers, realigning shield arrays. He checked the coolant lines by touch, tracing the conduits along the wall. When he found a rattle in the third junction, he tightened the bolt. Not too tight, just right. He never looked at the others. He didn't give orders, they didn't ask. Outside, the Corin diplomatic shuttle hovered in position, 30 m from the Mercy's side. Lights on, cameras active, waiting for a reply. Inside the Soyuz command chamber, strategist Jalin stood rigid at the communication node. "Still no response," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "No changes, no requests, just waiting." Jalin didn't like the sound of his own words. Ambassador Varric adjusted his robe cuffs, eyes fixed on the still image on screen. Mercy turning slowly, her hull catching the starlight. General Herrick watched in silence. A single vein in his temple pulsed silver-blue beneath his skin. "Send another hail," he said. Jalin nodded, channel open, transmission on loop, audio and text. He tapped the console. "This is the Corin diplomatic envoy. We are standing by to assist. Please respond." Repeat, "This is the Corin diplomatic envoy." On the Mercy's bridge, the comm unit blinked. Angus glanced at it. He tapped a single command key. His voice came through the line without emotion, filtered through standard comm protocol. "Conducting repairs, no assistance required. Ignore collateral damage." Mercy signing off. Then the channel cut. On the Soyuz deck, no one moved. Varric let out a dry breath. That was brief. Jalin frowned. He just cut the line. He didn't even ask who we were. Varric said quietly. Herrick narrowed his eyes at the screen. "Replay the tone." The technician played it back. The message repeated, not curt, not angry, just clinical. Herrick stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "Maintain visual monitoring, deploy full-spectrum scan teams. I want internal readings, structure composition, crew telemetry, everything. I want to know who is speaking." "Already underway," said Gorv. Inside the Mercy, the crew continued their quiet work. Kev finally stood, moved toward the viewport. His breath caught slightly when he saw the Soyuz shuttle still parked outside, still watching. "They're not leaving," he murmured. No one answered. Calder finished cleaning the floor, sat down next to a medbay chair, closed his eyes. Maurice powered down the broken scanner and set it on a tray beside the others, lined them up perfectly spaced, then realigned them again. The satellite feed still streamed, uncut. From orbit, the Mercy looked operational, composed, clinical. Around her, frozen corpses drifted in soft ellipses, gently rotating in the dark. Inside the Soyuz intelligence bay, technicians cataloged it all. Atmospheric readouts show a stabilized environment, one of them said. Minimal residual trauma, another added. No heat bloom from weapons, no pattern of resistance, no combat logs, just surgical data, a third said system.